cup at a time. Tea time. Yeah, this is tea time. Yeah. Making a difference. One cup at a time. Tea time. So be sure to grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz. Tea time. Making a difference. One cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. Tea time.
Well, welcome back. Miss Liz is in the house, and you know what that means. It means it's tea time. And in this house, we serve storytelling and words. We do not serve a beverage, but we do drink the beverage from time to time. Miss Liz does have a nice lemon ginger tea here in the house tonight. And tonight I have Michael Hingson in the house, and we're going to sit and we're going to teach educational awareness through Michael's journey and story. So be sure to join us for that. If you have any comments or questions and you'd like to join the live stream, please put your comments in the section and all that good stuff. And if you'd like to stay anonymous, you can send Miss Liz a message in my Facebook page and I will get those questions out to Michael during our conversation tonight. But before we get started, we're going to get you guys over to Miss Liz's YouTube channel. It's called Miss Liz's Tea Times. That's right. I keep it very simple. Ring that little doorbell and you'll be notified when all these tea times are live if you'd like to join the live stream. If you'd like to watch the replays, there's over 400 different interviews on there from all walks of life with over 175 different topics. So let's get started with the disclaimer and an amazing bio of Michael. And then we're going to get Michael in here and we're going to spill some tea together tonight and have a good conversation. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz myself is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to see your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that the content brought forward for any Tea Time show hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forward in good faith. However, may bring forward dialogues and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All Tea Time guests and audience participants are responsible for using their good judgment and taking any action that may relate to the discussion. The content brought forward may include discussions for some where they may be emotionally at risk. It's significant to know that the show is engaging in discussion forums only to offer and inspire awareness and connection and is not providing therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about the disclaimer or the panel's discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, through my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in tonight's show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. And should you decide that the show's not made for you at this time, I respect those wishes and will see you at a later show at a later date and time. And again, as everyone knows, Miss Liz is closing up the podcast world. We have 2 tea times left, so Michael is my second tea time before the last. Tomorrow will be the last tea time of Miss Liz's podcast. 5 years, 5 long, beautiful seasons with incredible guests. So we're going to keep it going. So now a little bit on Michael. Well, who's Michael? Michael Hingson was blind since birth. Was born in Chicago to supportive, sighted parents who instilled in him a can-do attitude. Embracing life like any other child, Michael rode a bike, mastered advanced math in his head, and learned Braille. At 5, his family moved to Palmdale, California, where he received his first guide dog from Guides Dogs for the Blind, marking the beginning of his adventurous journey. Michael pursued higher education, earned a bachelor and master's degree in physics, along with a secondary teaching credential from the University of California, Irvine. He spent nearly 3 decades in high-tech management roles before his life changed dramatically on September 11, 2001. Alongside his guide dog, Razel, Michael escaped from the 78th floor of the Tower 1 in the World Trade Center. Just before it collapsed, cultivating him into the international spotlight. He began sharing his powerful survival story, emphasizing the lessons of trust, courage, heroism, and teamwork. Throughout his career, Michael has held various leadership positions in prominent organizations, including serving as the National Public Affairs Director for Guide Dogs for the Blind, Vice President of the National Association of Guide Dog Users, and chairing the Earl Baum Center for the Blind. He was also the CEO of the Do More Foundation and currently serves as the Chief Vision Officer for Accessibility. a company dedicated to making the internet accessible for all. An accomplished author, Michael's first book, Thunderdog, became a number one New York Time bestseller, selling over 2.5 million copies worldwide. He has since published two more books, including Running with Rosal and Live Like a Guide Dog, the latter for focusing on overcoming fear in crisis. Michael has traveled globally, sharing his message with audience ranging from Fortune 500 companies to universities and even former President George W. Bush. He is recognized as an expert on teamwork, diversity, and adaptability technology training, helping organizations embracing inclusion and innovation. As of June 24th, Michael was inducted into the Honor Fraternity Psi Beta Calta. He currently resides in Victorville, California, with his eight guide dog, Alamo, and his rescue cat, Stitch. For more information about Michael Hingson, you can visit his website, which I'll have across the screen during our conversation tonight. And you'll see his press kit there as well. So let me get Michael in here and let's spill some tea. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you, Michael. I really wanted to get your bio out because I wanted my listeners and audience to know the incredible journey that you've had right from the get go to where you are today.
Well, thank you.
So, Michael, I'm going to take you way back to the little boy, and then we're going to know who Michael is. So, who was Michael as a little guy besides what was in the bio?
Well, he was a nosy kid, certainly for part of the time. He was a kid who liked to explore. I was born in Chicago. And when I was 4 months old, it was discovered that I was blind. And when it was determined that I was, the doctors told my parents that they should just send me off to a home for handicapped kids because no blind child could ever grow up to be a contributor in society. And all I would do would be to suck out the love that they even had for my older brother, and that I would really be a problem. And my parents said, "You're absolutely wrong. He can grow up to do whatever he wants, and we're going to give him that opportunity." And they did. And they instilled that attitude in me, I think is appropriate to say as well. So I always liked playing with things. So a lot of technological sorts of things. I always had a kind of an interest in science. I became interested in radios and so on. My father was owned his own company while we were in Chicago repairing televisions, because back in the 1950s, if a TV broke, since it had vacuum tubes and other things like that, and then if something died, you didn't replace the TV, you replaced the component. And so sometimes I even went on calls with him and investigated the insides of televisions, and occasionally they were plugged in, so I would get shocked occasionally, and so I learned really that wasn't a good thing to do. But I went to kindergarten in Chicago because in Chicago kindergarten starts at the age of 4, and it was a special class for blind kids because my parents worked with other parents to advocate for having something for blind children. There were a number of us who were born prematurely, and so the Perry School was where the kindergarten class was held, and I learned Braille there and so on. But then at the age of 5, my father moved us to California and took a job working for um, the government. And so then I had to take kindergarten again because California didn't care that Chicago had kindergarten at 4. So at the same time, I didn't have any access to Braille. I was really kind of the only kid at the school who was blind. And through the 3rd grade, I didn't have access to Braille or any of the kinds of things that would have been helpful to have. But between 3rd and 4th grade, the school district hired someone because there were more blind kids coming into the district. And so they hired a woman, Mrs. Hirschberger, to be a resource teacher, and she was able to do things like get me and others Braille books and things like that so that we could more easily participate in class. So I enjoyed doing that and started doing more of that. Still keeping an interest in radio and so on. I joined the Cub Scouts and then the Boy Scouts. And at the age of 14, I got my first ham radio license. My father waited until I could get a license for him to get his license. He was an electronics and electrical engineer. So we got our licenses at the same time, and we did things like set up ham radios at each end of the house, and we would talk back and forth to each other, saying, "How's the weather where you are?" "Oh, the weather is great here. How's it over there?" "Well, it's snowing here, you know," and we're like 50 feet away from each other, and all the other ham operators knew that, so they got a great kick out of us doing it. I went through Boy Scouts and also went through high school. And as you mentioned, I got my first guide dog when I went into high school. His name was Squire. He was a golden retriever. But I continued to have an interest in science. And as I said, joined, and participated in various scouting activities, became an Eagle Scout, as well as joining Order of the Arrow, which was the honor society of scouts. I was inducted into that and attained the rank of Vigil, which is the highest rank possible. And then between junior and senior year, and we had decided, we being me and my brain, that I wanted to get a degree in physics because the fourth quarter of my freshman year, my general science teacher, Mr. Dills, said, "You're pretty bored in this class, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I know all this stuff." And he said, "All right, we're going to send you down for your last quarter of a freshman year, not to be in general science, but you're going to go down to the senior physics class and you're going to be taught by Mr. McGregor." And he knew Mr. Dills knew I liked radio and all that. And that was the quarter they were going to be teaching electricity and magnetism. I got an A. Anyway, was interested in physics after that. And the bottom line is that when I decided I wanted to do that in college, we looked for colleges, and I eventually enrolled at the University of California at Irvine, which is about 100 miles south of where we lived in Palmdale. And so I went to UC Irvine, got a master's degree in physics, a secondary teaching credential, worked at the campus radio station, KUCI, and was program director 1 year. And right at the end of the time I was at UC Irvine, Phi Beta Kappa, which is the Educational Honor Society, it's a very prestigious organization, held an organizational chapter meeting at UC Irvine. But unfortunately, I was leaving, so I couldn't join, but I did get to go to the organizational chapter meeting. And I mentioned that because, and you mentioned it a little bit during your bio, this last year, they learned that I had been at the organizational meeting but couldn't join because I left UC Irvine, and I was inducted as an alumni member of Phi Beta Kappa and joined Phi Beta Kappa this past June, which was kind of fun. Anyway, I went through college and got a master's degree, as I said, a secondary teaching credential. I joined the National Federation of the Blind, which is the largest organization of blind consumers in the world, actually, and the largest in the United States, and became pretty active in that. So that's kind of the young Mike Hingson up through college.
I actually had Carmen Swick on Teatime, Michael, and she works with the Blind Foundation of America as well with her son.
Uh-huh.
So, have you heard of that foundation?
I don't know the Blind Foundation of America. I'm not sure what that is.
So, Michael, we have a couple questions that have come in while you were sharing. So, the first question that we have for you: was it hard to learn Braille?
Is it hard to learn to read print? Look, Braille, excuse me, Braille is truly and literally an alternative to print that is used by people who aren't going to read print. And so the answer is, it's no harder to learn to read Braille than it is to read print if it's how you're brought up. Now, unfortunately, for a lot of people who become blind later in life, it is a little bit more of a challenge, but the bottom line is for kids, it's no harder. The big problem is that educators generally decided that we don't need to teach blind kids Braille because they can learn by listening to computers and listening to audio books and so on. But the bottom line is that's as inappropriate as can be. Blind kids should learn Braille like sighted kids learn print. If you don't think that blind kids need to learn Braille because they can listen to things, then let kids who are sighted watch cartoons. Don't teach them to read print. If you're not willing to do it the wrong way, then you teach Braille to every blind child. And not only totally blind children, but low vision people as well, because a lot of those kids are not going to be able to read print very well. Unfortunately, society doesn't really look at it that way, but the bottom line is that's what should be done. So in short answer to the question again is no, it's no harder to learn to read Braille than it is to learn to read print.
Now, Michael, do you feel that Braille should be in all schools?
Yes. If there is a blind kid, then they should be learning Braille wherever they are. And Braille should be taught the same way you teach people to read print. A lot of educators think that the way you teach Braille is you teach like A through J in your first grade and K through S in the second grade and so on. That's a lot of bull. That's not how you teach sighted kids to read print, and that's not how you should teach blind kids to read Braille, which is, as I said, a true alternative to print. Good Braille readers read quite rapidly. Good Braille readers will read as fast pretty much as any typical sighted reader will read. So you've got to give people that opportunity. If you're going to be an inclusive society, if we are all going to be inclusive, then we need to make Braille available to blind kids just like we make print available to sighted people.
I absolutely agree on that one. The next question that came in, Michael, while you were sharing is you got your first dog in high school, guide dog in high school. How was that for you?
Um, the school made the decision that I would probably be responsible enough to be able to take care of a guide dog. And I believe that I did okay with that. But the bottom line is that, that was a choice. I didn't learn to use a cane until I was 18. They didn't teach cane travel where I was. We had met a woman who had a guide dog. She was a teacher at Edwards Air Force Base, about 40 miles from where we lived. She taught the children from military families and so on. She was blind, had a guide dog named Nola, a German Shepherd, and she helped us get the school to believe that I could use a guide dog. And so when I went to get my dog after 8th grade, I learned and then came back with Squire, and we then went to the high school so I could learn how to get around the school before the school year actually began. So when Palmdale High School began its classes, I knew how to get around the school, which was really important. People need to understand what a guide dog does and what a guide dog does not do. A guide dog doesn't lead a blind person. It's not the dog's job to know where I want to go and how to get there. And I don't want my dog to know that. What I want my dog to do is to make sure that we walk safely. It's my job to know where to go and how to get where I want to go. And I'm not going to sit here and say dogs don't memorize routes, but the problem is that is what they do. They memorize routes. What if I want to go somewhere else? I have to be the one to make those decisions. The dog's job is to make sure that I walk safe. And so it was fun working with a guide dog in school. Everybody wanted to visit with the dog, and I had to make sure people understood you don't do that while the dog is in harness. So again, it was a great learning experience for me.
Well, it's about the teamwork, right? Because you had to work as a team to get to know each other, how to know when you wanted to go left, right, all of that good stuff, right? Was there any training before you took the dog into the school, or were you just given the dog and here you go?
Well, what happened was that I went to the school to Guide Dogs for the Blind for training for 4 weeks. And so beyond that, it was my ability and skill to learn how to get around. So what we did after we got back from getting the dog, probably a couple of weeks before school started, my mother and I would go over to the school and we would walk around the school and I would learn where different buildings were, where different rooms were, and so on. And that way I learned how to get around the school. I learned where the gym was and and other places. And in my new book, Live Like a Guide Dog, that you mentioned briefly earlier, we go through and we talk about lessons I learned from each of my 8 guide dogs, plus my wife's service dog, Fantasia. And in doing those lessons and learning about being resilient and learning how to control fear rather than letting it overwhelm, or as I put it, blind one, um, we talk in the book about how my mother and I went to Palmdale High School and I learned the school. So kind of go into a fair amount of detail there about it.
Wow. So, Michael, you mentioned you have eight. You have had eight guide dogs, correct?
Correct.
So, has
I
each
got my first guide dog in 1964, and I've had guide dogs ever since.
dog been different?
Oh yes, every dog is different. Dogs have personalities just like people have personalities, and the school's job is to try to match dog personality to person personality and to the needs of the person. And so I think they do a good job of that. But yeah, every dog is different. Some are more well confident, some are less confident, some are more um, passive in nature, some are more hesitant, some are more willing to just step right out. Some are more easily distracted than others. I mean, you could go down a long list of different things that make the dogs unique.
So, Michael, now let's go down the journey of what changed your life, impacted your life to where you are a motivational speaker in today with Thunderdog. Let's talk about Thunderdog and how that book came about. And I believe that dog's name was
Roselle, yes.
Roselle.
Roselle, Roselle. Well, as many people may know, and I'm sure there are those who don't, I worked in the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. I was the Mid Atlantic Region sales manager for a computer company, and I had been hired to open an office, and they ended up doing it in the World Trade Center because we got a great deal on office space. And so when the buildings were attacked, I had spent a lot of time learning all I could about the complex, learned where different places were, learned all the emergency evacuation procedures, learned everything I could about the complex. Um, and I did that not because I necessarily expected an emergency, but rather because I needed to know that so I could function like any leader of an office would function. So, for example, if we had guests in our office, and we were going to be negotiating contracts. But before doing that, they decided they wanted to do lunch. I couldn't just rely on somebody else to lead me to wherever we need to go. I needed to be able to step out and say, "Well, what kind of food do you want? All right, here I'll take you to. You want deli sandwiches? Fine in Shapiro down on the first floor of the World Trade Center. Is that okay?" The point is, if I didn't do that, if I couldn't act as confidently and as capably as anyone else, how could I be involved in negotiating multi-million dollar contracts? So I had to do all of that. That was part of what I needed to do. The other part about it is, since I learned all that, I didn't have to rely on signs if there were an emergency, which of course there was. And so I knew what to do. And that had created a mindset in me that, in fact, took over on September 11th so that I knew what to do and I didn't have to worry about it. And so the result was that I could walk confidently down the stairs. Was I afraid? Sure, like anyone else. I didn't know what was going on. And people say to me all the time, well, of course, you didn't know what happened because you couldn't see it. I love sighted people who don't know what the heck they're talking about. I hate to be so blunt, but true. The reality is that the airplane hit 18 floors above us on the other side of the building. And the bottom line is that the last time I heard, Superman and X ray vision are fictitious. And so nobody could see through 18 floors of steel, rebar, and concrete from our office. And going down the stairs with hundreds of other people, no one knew what had happened. The only thing we figured out was an airplane probably hit the building because as we started down the stairs, I began smelling an odor. And after about 4 floors, I realized that I was smelling the fumes from burning jet fuel because I did a lot of traveling even back then through airports. And I observed that to the people around me, and they said, "Oh, you're right. That's what it is. That's what we're smelling. We must have been hit by an airplane." But the bottom line is, no one knew. Had nothing
Wow.
to do with blindness.
Absolutely. And the ignorance, right?
Well, it's the problem is people don't recognize that every person on this planet has a disability. Sighted people have just as much a disability as I do. The problem is that they don't recognize it because Thomas Edison invented the electric light bulb, which, especially with the incredible amount of light on demand that's available to people today, covers up their disability, which is light dependence. If lights go out, you don't have an immediate access to a smartphone or a flashlight or something like that, you're in a world of hurt if you're sighted. It doesn't bother me a bit. And there are a whole lot more sighted people than blind people. I understand that. But sighted people need to start being held to a higher standard of saying just because somebody's different than us, it doesn't mean that they're less than us. So disability does not mean a lack of ability, although my diversity friends try to convince me of that because they say it begins with dis. And my response is, yeah, well, so does decipher, discern, and discrete as examples. They begin with dis, but
Yep.
they're not a lack of. So the bottom line is disability is a characteristic that everyone has. It's just that it manifests itself differently for different people depending on what their gifts are. And we've got to start getting to the point where we recognize that so we don't view somebody who's different than us as less than us. Because the bottom line is if the lights go out in a room and I'm in a room with a bunch of sighted people, I don't need to worry about seeing where to go to get out. I already know, and I know how to get there, and I can help those people. In fact, walking down the stairs at the World Trade Center, I even joked at one point and said to people, my name is Mike. You know, if you can hear me, my name is Mike, and I've got my guide dog, Roselle, here. I happen to be blind. If the power and lights go out, don't anybody worry. We're offering a half price special to get you out today only. And I was very deliberate about that. One, I wanted people to laugh, but I also wanted people to know because there was always the possibility we could have lost power, which we did not, but on the stairs we could have. And it did happen later when Tower 2 collapsed, and then I think Tower 1 lost its light. But the bottom line is, I wanted people to know that there was somebody who could make sure and help them to ensure that they got out safely.
Well, I think it was important to keep the humor there, right? Because there was
Oh,
so
sure.
much confusion and fear at that moment. I know I do the same thing when I'm in a situation where I got a lot of fear and I'm scared. I'm going to throw a joke in just to break that ice, right? Break
Well,
that
there had been a fair
tension.
amount of conversation, and the conversation was kind of quieting down. So that was one of the reasons I did it. But yeah,
So during that time going down those stairs, Michael, how was the dog acting? How were the people around you acting?
there were a few times that people started to panic. And when that occurred, we would stop and literally have a group hug and say, come on, you're okay. You can keep going. Don't worry about it. We're all together. There were some people who were very focused and who helped keep others from panicking going down the stairs. And that was important to do because if we had allowed panic to ensue, then none of us would have made it out. People would have trampled us trying to get out and all that. We needed to keep people focused. My colleague David Frank, who was with me in the World Trade Center that day because he was in our office to help with some seminars we were going to be doing. David at one point finally said, Mike, we're going to die. We're not going to make it out of here. And I just said back to him, stop it, David. If Roselle and I can go down these stairs, so can you. And I snapped at him deliberately because I needed to get him to focus. And he told me later that it did. And then what he did is that he decided he was going to walk a floor below me and shout up to me everything that he saw because that was his way of taking his mind off of worrying and fear. And so he did that. But there was another aspect of him doing that that people don't talk about nearly so much. So I got to the 49th floor and he was at 48 and he said, hey, Mike, I'm at the 48th floor. All's good here. He's going on down. I get to 47 and he's at 46, 46th floor. And when he got to the 44th floor and I was at 45, hey, I'm at the 44th floor. This is where the Port Authority cafeteria is, not stopping, going on down. The reason I mention it is because what David did was really something that, as I said, people don't talk about, and that is that he became a focal point for anyone in the sound of his voice who could hear him say, 43rd floor, all's good. He told people essentially somewhere above you or below you, depending on where you were, but somewhere within the sound of his voice or within the sound of your hearing, there was somebody who was okay on the stairs. So you don't need to worry. And he had to have kept lots of people focused as we went down the stairs because he kept shouting up to me. Did I need him to shout up? No. But it helped him. And I know it helped so many other people because they heard him go 44th or 40th floor, all's good here, all the way down the stairs. So it was a very important and useful thing. So a lot of us worked really hard to make sure that nobody panicked as we went down the stairs because that would have been a real serious problem for all of us.
And these are things that people are not talking about, right, Michael?
No, not a lot.
So during that time going down those stairs, Michael, was there any debris falling or was
Not
it?
where we were. No, the airplane hit up between the 93rd floor and the 99th floor. So I just say the 96th floor. The building had tipped and then it came back to a vertical position. So there was nothing on the stairs where we were or any of that. No.
Oh, well, that's good. And you made it out safe, and your friends made it out safe. What? How did your life change after that moment?
Well, um, it the first thing I would say is it validated everything I believed about my abilities and about what blind people could and couldn't do, because we made it out, and we made it out because I followed all of the things that I had learned and put all of that learning into practice. But the other thing that happened was that the next day we called guide dogs for the blind, because some of the people from the school had been back to New York and visited us. They wanted to see the World Trade Center and all that, and we took them on tours and took them up to the top, and they looked out they came and looked out of the windows in our offices and so on. So we wanted to remind people at Guide Dogs, that we were okay, because people would eventually remember that they had visited us. So among other people, I talked with Joanne Ritter, who was our director of public information. And Joanne said, "Gee, do you mind if I write a little story about you? I think people would be interested." And I didn't worry about it. I just said, no, I wasn't thinking, or, whatever. And then she said, I'll bet you're going to be on TV. What show do you want to be on if you get a choice? And I said, Larry King Live, which was on CNN. And so several things happened. By Thursday, the media had gotten the story. And on Friday, the 14th, I had the first of 5 interviews on Larry King Live.
Wow.
And then the next week, I got a call from a pastor of a church in New Jersey who was going to be conducting an outdoor service to honor all the people from New Jersey who were lost in the World Trade Center. And he asked if I would come and speak. And I said, sure, I would be glad to. How long do you want me to talk? And he said, only like 5 or 6 minutes or so. And I said, fine. How many people are going to be there? Oh, probably 6,000.
Wow.
And so that was my first public speech after September 11th. And then we started getting calls asking me to come and talk about September 11th, asking me to come and talk about the lessons to learn from it, and also asking me to come and talk about my job, lessons I could teach people about leadership and trust and teamwork and inclusion, resilience, and so on. And it wasn't too long before my wife and I had a conversation and decided that selling life and philosophy was a whole lot more satisfying and rewarding than selling computer hardware and managing a computer hardware sales team. And so at the end of 2001, I left Quantum, and I also joined Guide Dogs for the Blind as their national public affairs director. But I also then started doing public speaking, and it got pretty visible after that, and continuing to do it ever since.
So, Michael, since that the World Trade Center, has there been any training for like high rises and that with the guide dogs?
I'm not sure what you would train. They teach them how to go up and down stairs and so on, but you can't really teach somebody, or you can't teach a dog about what do you do if there's an airplane that crashes into the building. What you do need to do, and this gets back to the basic, how do you teach blind people? How do you teach blind kids? And that's where it comes down to, you got to teach awareness. You got to teach people that they need to learn about their environments and be aware of how to get around and do things. It's the person's job. The dog's job, again, is only to make sure that we walk safely. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Only is probably not the right thing to say. The dog's job is to make sure that we walk safely. But I have to be the one to direct the dog. That's my job. And the dog's job is to take those directions and follow them and keep us safe. When we do that collectively together and we do it well, that's what it's all about. And that's because we become a close knit team, the two of us. And so it doesn't matter whether it's a tall building or not. The bottom line is that person and dog have to learn how to form a substantive team, and they need to learn how to be able to work together and respect each other's jobs. And the dog needs to understand that I am the team leader of the team, but I have to earn that dog's trust. I think dogs do love unconditionally, but they don't trust unconditionally. The reality is that dogs have to um, learn to trust us, and we have to learn to trust them. I tell people that it takes maybe as long as a year to really establish a good cohesive relationship if you work at it. And that's what we work to do.
So, Michael, we have a question here. Is there a special breed of dog that's used to be guide dogs?
There are several breeds that work better than others. The most successful breed is Labrador Retriever for size, they're dual coated, temperament, and so on. It used to be German Shepherds, but the problem is to really make a German Shepherd a successful guide dog, you really end up breeding a lot of what goes into making a shepherd out of the dog because they're herding dogs. Golden Retrievers are used. They tend to have more skin allergies and a little bit more sensitive in that regard. So labs are the best. Some French poodles have been trained because essentially hypoallergenic or dandruff allergy issues. But labs are the most successful. And even with labs, only 50% make it. And they make it because they're cut out to be a dog. When a lab or any dog doesn't make it as a guide dog, it doesn't mean they're bad. They're not failures. It's like with anyone or anything, they're just not cut out to serve in that job. And so they may go off and they may do other things. They may just be well-trained pets. But just because a dog doesn't make it as a guide dog, and the schools have learned over the years, your dog is not a failure. What we call it is career changed, because that's really what it's all about. They change what they do, or we change what they do, and they go off and they do something else. I know dogs who are very much involved in cancer detection, diabetes detection. They help people in wheelchairs, um, people who are deaf or hard of hearing, any number of different things, seizure detection, bomb detection. But guiding is very stressful because once that harness goes on, if the dog really takes it very seriously, which they do if you've developed that close-knit team relationship, then they're going to really be on all the time while the harness is on. My job is to make it as relaxing and as calm and as unstressful as I can for the dog. So, for example, if people come up to me and they say, "Can I pet your dog?" I'll say, "No, not while the harness is on," because the dog is busy. On the other hand, if I have time, I will stop, I'll take the harness off, and I will let people visit with Alamo or any of my dogs because they have to relax too. The dog does. Now, I had one woman who came up once and she asked if she could pet my dog, and I said no, and I was actually in somewhat of a hurry. But all of a sudden, Alamo, or it wasn't Alamo, it was Africa, my previous guide dog to Alamo, um, was not acting normally. She was looking around and so on, and I knew that this woman was petting her. So I gave a not a hard tug, but a brief, sort of a brisk tug on the leash and said, "Leave it," to get Africa to pay attention. The woman said, "Well, don't yell at the dog. I was petting the dog. I didn't listen to what you said." I said, "No, you don't understand. You got the dog in trouble. The dog knows better. You
Yeah.
got the dog in trouble. I'm going to deal with the dog, and then I'll deal with you."
Yeah. Well, that's it, right? They're working. They're a working
They're
dog.
working dogs. Now, if children come up and want to pet the dog, I don't care what time I do or don't have, I'll always stop and take the harness off because too many parents say, "Oh, don't pet that dog, it might bite you," and all that. And I always want kids to get a good feeling about the dog. So I will always let children pet the dog, but only once the harness comes off.
Yeah.
I
Well,
went I went to New York last month and spoke to a lot of seventh and eighth graders. Actually, 21 different social studies classes over a 3-day period. And at the end of each class, we let people come up. I took the harness off, and Alamo was ready to go visit everybody. Had a good time.
so, Michael, what got you into writing books?
So in 2002, Roselle was honored at the American Kennel Club Canine Eukanuba Dog Championship. It was a dog show. And while there, I met George Berger, who was the president, who was the publisher of the American Kennel Club Gazette magazine. And he said, "You ought to write a book." And I said, "I hadn't really thought about it." And he said, "Well, you should. People would read it." So I went home and I started taking notes, and he said, I can get you hooked up with some people. And he did, but they wanted a business book. And I didn't want a business book. I wanted a book that people would generally be able to read, not just for businesses. And so um, in 2010, I had been taking notes. And as I tell people, I had like over a megabyte worth of notes on my computer. And I got a call one Sunday afternoon from a woman named Susie Flory. And she was writing a book called Dog Tales. It was going to be 17 chapters, each one about a dog and things that they had done, famous dogs. And she wanted to include Roselle. And she said, would you tell me your story? Well, I had time and I told her the story. And after we were done, there was this pause. And then she said, you ought to write your own book. She still said, I want to put Roselle in, but you need to write a book and I want to help you do it. And I explained to her all the things that I just told you. Well, anyway, she introduced me to her agent, who became my agent, Chip McGregor. And we told him what we wanted to do. And he said, well, I just don't want a 9/11 book because there are too many of those. And I said, good, I don't want a 9/11 book either. This is what I want. I want to teach people about blindness. I want to teach them about guide dogs. I want to tell my story and get people to think and learn. Well, he said, okay, send me a proposal. Well, we wrote a proposal, Susie and I. We sent it to him. We got a call. He's bouncing off the walls. He loved the proposal. And within a week, he had sold it to Thomas Nelson, which was the largest publisher of Christian books, and which now is part of HarperCollins. So we wrote it, and it was published on August 2nd of 2011. And the next week, we got a call from the people at Thomas Nelson, and they said, we got to tell you something. They were sounding all unhappy and all that. And I said, okay, well, what? And he said, well, we've got to really sit down. We need you to sit down. We don't want to tell you while you're standing up. And I said, well, Karen's sitting down. Karen, by the way, my now late wife, was in a wheelchair her whole life. So of course she was sitting down. And they said, no, you got to sit down. So I said, I was sitting already, but so I said, okay, well, actually, I'm sitting down. And the next thing we hear is, in its first week out, Thunderdog is on the New York Times bestseller list. And later it became #1 for a week. But it was a bestseller in its first week, and it was on the list for 13 weeks. And so we enjoy it. It's still out for sale. It's available anywhere books are available. It's available in Audible and so on as well. And it tells my story not only of being in the World Trade Center, but really how I got there with all the lessons and things that I learned in life. So I hope people will get it. If they do, I hope they will then go to Amazon or read it and review it because or read it. It's important that we get as many reviews for Thunderdog as we can to want to keep it going, and as well as my new book, Live Like a Guide Dog. But I hadn't really thought of myself as being an author, but 2 years later, Susie Flory convinced me that I ought to write a children's version. So she introduced me to a woman who writes children's books, and we collaborated on Running with Roselle, which is really a story of Roselle growing up and me growing up and how we met and so on. So it's not really a September 11th book so much. But then when the pandemic occurred, I realized I'd been talking for 19 years about the World Trade Center and talking about teamwork and so on in my life. And I had talked about being focused when I went down the stairs, but I never taught other people how they could learn to control fear and to learn to recognize that fear is a healthy thing if you use it, and don't let it blind or paralyze you or overwhelm you, but rather teach you that you can use fear as a very powerful tool to keep you focused. And so another friend of Susie's and I met, and we collaborated and wrote Live Like a Guide Dog, true stories from a blind man and his dogs about being brave, overcoming adversity, and moving forward in faith, which is really all about lessons I learned from my 8 dogs and Fantasia, my wife's service dog, that I use to understand and control fear, and to live my life and live a more focused, calm life. And so it was published in August of this year, and it also is available anywhere books are available.
So, Michael, how did you get the title Thunderdog?
I didn't. The marketing people at Thomas Nelson wanted to name the book that. I wanted to call it Forward because that's the first basic command of a guide dog, but they really liked Thunderdog, and they felt that a lot of bookstores were going to put it in the animal section in addition to other places. So I said, okay. And obviously it's worked really well.
So, Michael, out of all the dogs that you've had, which one has been the one that gave you the most challenge?
Oh, that's really hard. They all do in their own way, but probably the one that was the most challenging was my sixth guide dog, Meryl. Like Meryl Streep. Meryl only worked about 18 months and then she became afraid of guiding. She just became hesitant. The problem with Meryl was, as I discovered fairly early on, I would describe her as a type A personality. She couldn't leave work at the office. When the harness came off, she still had to follow me around and focus. She wouldn't play with the other dogs. And literally, she let stress overwhelm her.
Oh,
So that
wow.
was probably the biggest challenge.
So, Michael, I want to talk to you about the bond of human and animal because that's something that you speak about as well. So, tell us a little bit about the importance of the bond between an animal and human.
As I said, the fact is that dogs don't trust unconditionally. I think they do love unconditionally, but they won't trust you. Um, and that's what teamwork is really all about. They have to, or we have to earn their trust, but they also have to earn our trust. And for pet owners in general, you should really focus more on learning how to communicate with and interact with your dog. Don't just think of it as some dumb animal and you let it run around the house or you tie it up or whatever. Dogs are very bright. They have a lot that they can do to add to our family. And the more we treat them like team members in the family and family members, you don't feed them a bunch of junk food. You got to be disciplined. Dogs love to know what the rules are. They want to know what you expect from them. And when you are communicating that in a positive way, um, like when the dog does what you want, you tell it it's good, you reward it. There are a lot of different training techniques to do that. You don't beat up on a dog when it misbehaves. You reward good behavior. So it's kind of operant conditioning sorts of things, if you will. But if you do it right with positive reinforcement and you're consistent, you will gain a very loyal friend. And that's what the bond is all about. It's just like creating any close-knit team. The difference between dogs and people, as I said, is that dogs don't trust unconditionally, but they're open to trust, which is something that humans generally aren't because we think everybody's out to get us, or we think that in the world everybody's got their own hidden agendas. And so we're not open to trust. We're not willing to say in various ways, I'll trust you, but if you trust me, but you have to earn my trust. It's not something you just get. Um, and people who do that well, however, do find that they can develop good trusting relationships. And so it is with dogs. Dogs, as I said, are open to trust. And if you develop that relationship, it's a great thing. And you'll find that, in fact, you can get very loyal friends who will stick with you all the time.
So, Michael, I want to talk about the skill toolboxes, preparing the skill toolboxes. What's that about?
That is all about the reality is we all have gifts, we all learn things. And what we really need to do is to understand our own selves, understand what gifts we have, understand how to use them. One of the things that I advocate and live like a guide dog, especially, is self analysis, being intrinsically involved in analyzing every day. How did this go? How did that go? Why was I afraid of this today? What do I do about it? And really look at what goes on every day. What went well? How could I have made it better? Taking the time at the end of every day to really look at what happened and thinking about it and admitting to yourself as you're thinking about things what worked and didn't and why and so on, you will develop a much stronger, as I put it, mind muscle that will help you understand the skills that you have. And when you understand those, you will learn more about how to use them, how to possibly lead other people, how to do your job better, how to focus better, and you will discover that in reality, you're more unstoppable than you think you are.
Absolutely. And I love that I found the skill toolbox on you, Michael, because my first email was called the toolbox tea party. So I like toolboxes because it's what we put into our boxes, right, and how we interact with individuals as well.
Well, and really that comes out of a speech topic I have. The title is Thinking Outside the Box Isn't Always the Best Approach. You need to learn how to use your inner toolbox.
Yeah.
And so it is a speech that I give. I'm in fact going to be giving that talk in Texas in um, February, late February, I think it is. Um, no, that one's going to be in April. But the bottom line is that we all have tools, we all have gifts, and it is okay to recognize that maybe you don't do some things as well as other people. Can you learn to do them? You can certainly explore that. But everybody has gifts, and we all should recognize the gifts that we have and the gifts that other people have, and learn how to blend those gifts together. That's what's really important. One of the things that I did when I was leading a sales force was tell every person who came to work for me, I'm not here to boss you around. You convinced me that you could sell my product or that you should be able to. Some people ended up not doing as well as I would have liked. But what you can do is um, work with me. My job is not to boss you around. My job is to find ways with you of how I can add value to what you do so that we can enhance you and make you more successful. So we have to look at the gifts that I bring to the team and the gifts that you bring to the team and blend those together to enhance what you sell in terms of how successful you are and so on. And when salespeople really got that, they were very much more successful because they learned how to work off of what I knew and what I could do and use the skills that I had as opposed to the ones that they had, and it worked out very well.
Well, it's almost like blending equals teamwork, right?
It's what it's about. But
So I
my
want
job
to,
isn't to boss people around. As I said, my job is to enhance you and add value to what you do. We're a team of two, not one.
absolutely. Well, that's what teamwork's all about, right? It's two, not just one.
There's no I in team.
That's right. Well, for me, it's T and me equals a team.
There you go.
So, Michael, I want to talk to you a little bit about the foundation that you have for Razal. It's called the Razal Dream
Roselle
Foundation.
Stream Foundation. Yeah, actually, we've pretty much discontinued it because it's been hard to really keep it going because other things have demanded more of my time. So we haven't really done a lot with Roselle Stream Foundation of late. Um, we set it up to be able to provide technology for blind kids who couldn't get it in other ways, and we did some of that. But we haven't really focused a lot on the foundation lately because other things have been going on, pandemics and other things that have kept me busy.
So, Michael, you also have a podcast. Do you want to share a little bit about that podcast so my listeners can jump over and check out your podcast?
I work with a company called Accessibe, Accessibe. Accessibe is a company that makes products that help make the internet more inclusive and accessible. And so, expanding range of products. It isn't just one. And the idea is that there are a lot of different needs for accessibility in the internet. Let's say you're a person with epilepsy, for example, and you go to a website where the elements are blinking, that could throw you into a seizure. And you should have a way to stop the blinking elements while maintaining the integrity of what somebody wanted was for you to focus on the things that were blinking so you can buy those things, but there are other ways to do that. Anyway, when I joined Accessibe in January of 2021, the founder asked me what I was doing at the time because it was the pandemic. And I said, well, I'm learning about podcasting. He said, funny thing, we'd really like a podcast um, for Accessibe. And I said, what do you want? And he said, I don't really care. I just want a podcast that will help people see that we're part of the world. So in August, we started Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And it's worded that way because diversity people typically don't talk about disabilities. If you talk to the average diversity person, they'll talk about DEI as being gender, race, sexual orientation, and so on. And if you would say, well, but you didn't mention disabilities, oh, that's social justice. That's a bunch of bull. It is not social justice. It is a minority of people, and it's probably a much larger minority. Well, it is a larger minority than any one, if not all of those other ones put together. except women, which is really the majority in the world. But the bottom line is that what I tell people is inclusion comes first. And if you include disabilities, then you're inclusive. If you leave out disabilities, then you can't say you're inclusive. And it goes back to what I talked about before, which is everybody really has a disability, but the so-called traditional disability world, the Center for Disease Controls here in the United States says that between 25 and 28% of all people have a sort of traditional disability. And so we put inclusion first because either you are truly inclusive or you can't use it. There's no halfway. Uh, that's the physics in me coming out. It's a quantum jump. You either are, which means you, among other things, include disabilities, or you're not inclusive. If you leave anyone out for any reason, you're not inclusive. You don't get to be partway because diversity is already left out disabilities. So I think more and more people are recognizing that diversity is way overused and it doesn't really include things that it should. So, unstoppable mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet, and unexpected is anything that doesn't have to do with inclusion or diversity, which is most things. So, it's a lot of fun. And we just tomorrow will be putting out episode 292 since we began it in August of 2021. In 2022, it got so visible on LinkedIn, so many people were asking us for opportunities to come on that we went to 2 episodes a week. So we're having a lot of fun with it.
Well, that's cool. And when does that play, Michael?
Every Tuesday and Friday, the episodes come out. It's recorded, so you can go to Michael Hingson, MichaelHingson.com/podcast, and you can see them all there. Or you can go to any of the usual places where you might find podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, and so on. It's also up on YouTube, on my YouTube channel.
Awesome. So, Michael, you just read out your website to all of the listeners and audio guys out there. So, if anybody would like to reach out to you, have them on their podcast or a speaker in that as well, can they find all of that on your website as well?
Yeah, they can go to www.michaelhingson.com. There's a contact form. You're also welcome to email me at speaker@michaelhingson.com. Love to talk with you. If you would like to be a guest, we're always looking for guests. The only gotcha is if you also have your own podcast, then the charge for you to be on my podcast is that I get to be on your podcast as well. I love to tease people with that. No, there's no charge for coming on the podcast, but I love to be a guest as well. But I'm always looking for podcast guests and I'm looking for speaking opportunities. So if anyone is involved with any organization that is looking for a speaker to come and motivate and educate, talk about a lot of the things that we've talked about here today, I'd love to hear from you. So speaker@michaelhingson.com or www.michaelhingson.com, and there's a contact form there.
And, Michael, what's your final message to everybody tonight?
We are all on the same planet. We're all part of the same world. And what we need to do is to recognize that each of us has gifts. Never sell someone else's gifts short. Honor everyone for what they bring. Don't assume that people don't bring anything to the party. And when you see a person with a disability, for example, don't assume they're less than you. Don't assume they need your help. They might. You can always go up and ask. It never hurts to ask, but accept the answer. If, for example, I'm standing at a street corner and you've seen me stand there through a full change of traffic lights from red to green and red and all that, and you come up and say, "Can I help you?" I'll probably say, "No, I'm fine," because I really wanted to get the traffic pattern before I decided to go. But the bottom line is it never hurts to ask. Go up and talk to people with disabilities. I've seen too many parents who say to their kids, "Don't go talk to that man. He's blind. You don't want to talk to him, or his dog might bite." That's just none of that is true. Don't fear something just because you don't know anything about it. Go up and be inquisitive and ask. Life is an adventure. We're all in it together. And it's most important that we accept that and that we live the adventure to the fullest.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. It was a pleasure having you on Tea Time and sharing your story and getting your books out there and all the incredible work that you've done. And your story, your personal story, is truly inspiring. I want to thank all the listeners and viewers who have tuned in and shared your questions and comments. Wendy, thank you for joining us in the studio tonight. She's also a past Tea Time guest. Check out her Teatime as well. She was on Teatime twice, I believe, in season 5 and in season 2, if I remember right. And I really want to thank all of you guys for tuning in to Miss Liz's. Tomorrow is the final show for Miss Liz's podcast. If you want to check out any of these podcast episodes, you can check out Miss Liz's YouTube channel or the multiple platforms that Miss Liz is carrying the platforms on. All of these tea time will be repurposed and reshared out throughout the year of 2025. So be sure to check those out as well. Stay tuned. We are going to make a difference, and we'll be back on at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow for the last tea time. And on December 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time till 9 p.m., we have the reunion show that will be taking place. And over 50 plus guests from all different seasons will be joining Miss Liz to share their farewells and memories and moments and all that good stuff. So that'll be an entertaining night as well. Big shout out to Mickey Mickelson from Creative Edge for giving me Michael and for giving me over 100 guests in the last 5 years. So thank you for that, Mickey, as well. Check him out as well.
And who knows? A bunch of people might tell you can't give up the podcast. Just keep it in mind.
There are a lot of people already doing that with me, Michael. But this is one branch that needs to be closed so that another branch can be open.
That's
and who
what
knows?
You say. There's nothing wrong with 2 branches.
Or we create a new branch, right?
Right.
So thank you again for that, Michael. Thank you for everybody. And I will see everybody tomorrow, same time, same place, and we'll do it all over again. Until then, stay safe and keep sharing your teas and keep being true to yourselves.